Please pray with me. Gracious God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts here together be acceptable in your sight, our rock and our redeemer. Amen. Human beings have a remarkable capacity to see exactly what they want to see in any given situation. In fact, sometimes that's all we are capable of seeing. There is a story that appears in both Matthew, Mark, and Luke, almost exactly in the same location in all three Gospels, about midway through, in which Jesus and his disciples are traveling, and they find themselves in a region that is known as Caesarea Philippi. And there, Jesus asks them a question. He wants to know, who do people say that I am? And of course, the disciples are eager to respond and share with him all of the propaganda they've been hearing about him. Well, they answer, some say you're John the Baptist, some say you're Elijah, or one of the prophets. And then Jesus puts them on the spot. He asks, who do you say that I am? And to this question, Peter is the only one who seems to have an answer. He replies, you are the Messiah. And Matthew has an addition. He says in Matthew, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. I'm sure you noticed in the Gospels that oftentimes when Jesus ministers to someone or he heals them miraculously, he then swears them to silence afterwards. He tells them not to say anything about him or what he has done. And the question comes up, why does Jesus do that? Why would Jesus want to silence people who are going to go out and tell others about who he is and what he can do for them in the name of God? And many Bible scholars will speculate that the reason Jesus does this is because he's trying to manage perceptions and expectations. Jesus understands that whatever people are going to say about them, to some extent at least, they're going to get it wrong. And then the wrong idea, the wrong perceptions or set of expectations are going to be out there for people. Jesus is trying to manage the perception. And of course, in our day, people who are very much in the public eye do this all the time. They hire publicists, people who will manage their perception in public. Politicians, people in power, do this as well, and they call the people who work for them spin doctors, because it's important for these people to be able to manage what you are seeing and what your perceptions are, what it is you are thinking about them. Jesus tried to do the same thing by silencing people, but of course, we all know that it's human nature. Once somebody tells you to keep a secret, you're all the more eager to divulge that secret to somebody. And so people would go off and proclaim loudly about Jesus whatever they perceived to be the truth about him. So what is it that the crowds of people were perceiving about Jesus on the day that he entered the city of Jerusalem, this day that we know as Palm Sunday? Well, the answer to that question, I think, is seen through the behaviors of the people and through the things that they say towards Jesus. First of all, we're told that as Jesus was entering the city that day, people took off their cloaks and cast them onto the ground. And of course, you saw an image of that with the camera as we entered the worship space this morning. We've done the same thing down the center aisle of our worship space this morning. So they threw the cloaks on the ground, in essence, creating their own red carpet for Jesus to ride over as he entered the city of Jerusalem. And then we're told that the people cut down branches from trees, leafy branches. Some of them may indeed have been palm branches, but the story doesn't specify this. We call this day Palm Sunday for a reason. Our imagination, of course, conjures up pictures of people waving palm branches as he entered the city that day. And indeed, they may have done that. Palm branches, of course, are an ancient symbol of triumph and victory. It could be any kind of a triumph or a victory, an athletic victory or a military triumph. But if you're waving a palm branch at somebody riding into the city, you are welcoming home, in essence, a conquering hero of some kind. I want to refer you for a moment to the image of the coin that I included in the bulletin that goes along with today's service. And it's a coin that pictures the Emperor Constantine. It's a coin that was minted during his reign. And that coin shows an image of the emperor on the front of it, looking very regal and godlike, as you would expect in a Roman coin. And then, of course, on the back, part of the coin that we would call the tails, also has an image of the emperor. And we see the emperor holding a palm branch in one hand and then a military trophy in the other. And curiously, next to the military trophy is a Christian symbol, the Chi Rho. Of course, Constantine was the first Christian emperor of Rome, and he put Christian iconography on the coin. The Chi Rho is the first two Greek letters in the word Christ. Christ is the equivalent of the word Messiah in Hebrew, and both words mean the anointed one. So it seems pretty clear from the actions of the people that they are welcoming the one they believe to be their Messiah into the city of Jerusalem. And that becomes even clearer through what they say. They shout, "Hosanna!" a word that means save us. And also, they call Jesus the Son of David. And that is probably the clearest reference to him being the Messiah. Because, of course, the expectation was that the Messiah would be a warrior king descended from the line of David. So the people are clearly seeing what they want to see as Jesus enters the city that day. Now, it would appear that Jesus does make some effort to manage those perceptions, however. As he and his disciples arrive at the top of the Mount of Olives, and they are about to descend into the city of Jerusalem, they can see the crowds beginning to form to welcome him in, and so Jesus calls a timeout. And he sends two of his disciples into the village of Bethphage nearby. And he gives them the instructions that they are to go and find a donkey and a colt. So, this is an addition that Matthew makes to the story, the colt. We are, of course, very well aware that Jesus rides a donkey into the city of Jerusalem, but Matthew, for some reason, adds a colt. And the reason I think Matthew does that is because he can see in this event of Jesus riding into the city the fulfillment of Zechariah 9, verse 9, which reads, "Tell the daughter of Zion, look, your king is coming to you, humble and mounted on a donkey, and on a colt, the foal of a donkey." The scene that Zechariah is depicting here is of a king, indeed, but one who is coming humbly to his people, riding a humble animal, a donkey or a colt. Certainly not the charging war horse, the mighty beast that you would be expecting a king to ride back from battle on. And if Matthew had included the next verse, verse 10, it would have made Jesus' intentions as he comes into the city even clearer, I think. Verse 10 reads, "He will cut off the chariot from Ephraim, and the war horse from Jerusalem, and the battle bull shall be cut off, and he shall command peace to the nations." So as far as Matthew is concerned, Jesus rides into Jerusalem in peace that day. He comes to make peace between God and humanity. However, the people still see their conquering Messiah. They're unable to see the figure who is right there in front of him, and they project that he is the conquering Messiah, who has come into town to lead them to triumph, to freedom, to liberation, and victory over their oppressors, over the Romans. And of course, the Romans can see this as well, and they are getting nervous about the way Jesus is coming into town and the reception of the crowds around him. Now, Jesus, I'm certain, was excited, was thrilled, heartened by the welcome he is receiving from the people. Who wouldn't be? Who wouldn't want to be welcomed by cheering crowds as one enters a city? However, Jesus can't afford to get caught up in the moment. He can't afford to start believing the publicity about him, because he knows that this is only going to last for a moment. The welcome, the enthusiasm is going to be very short-lived. Jesus knows what is coming. He can see clearly. He perceives what nobody else can perceive about what this week will mean. Now, you know that for some years, it has been customary for Palm Sunday to also be known as Passion Sunday. A worship service begins on Palm Sunday with a raucous celebration as we depict Jesus entering the city of Jerusalem, welcomed enthusiastically by the crowd. We celebrate through the beginning of the service. Well, as much of a celebration as we Lutherans typically are able to muster, because we have been indoctrinated to believe that the only appropriate posture for us to have in worship is one of stoic dignity. We maintain control of ourselves at all times. We can't afford to be expressing too much emotion in worship. But it seems to me, as Christians, no matter what time of year it is, or whatever the situation, when Jesus comes into our midst, when we are preparing to welcome him into our presence, we should be excited about that. And of course, it is now the beginning of Holy Week. We should be excited about the events that are to come. Now, how do we manage that on a year like this, where we are all separated, we are all isolated because of the coronavirus, and we can't even gather with the Christian community for this celebration? Now, on a Passion Sunday, we know that the service begins with the celebration, but it ends with the story of the Passion being read. And many of my colleagues believe that that is inappropriate, that these celebrations should be distinct and separate from one another. Palm Sunday should be its own celebration. It should be a party throughout. And the Passion story should be reserved for Good Friday. Good Friday alone. But I'm here to tell you, folks, that you can't remove cross from the landscape of Palm Sunday. It's impossible. It casts a shadow that looms over the celebration of Jesus' entry into Jerusalem, what we very often call the triumphal entry into Jerusalem. The cross is present because Jesus, as I say, perceives clearly what is going to happen. He knows that the road he is following into Jerusalem that day, that leads him past these cheering, raucous crowds, welcoming him, shouting, "Hosanna to the Son of David." The road will go on from there. The tide of public opinion, Jesus knows, is very fickle. And so the road he is following will lead him from the cheering crowds to a jeering mob in Pilate's courtyard, crying, "Crucify him!" And from there, this road will lead him up a hill called Calvary and to a cross.